On the foggy coast of Northern California near Crescent City sits one of the most feared prisons in America, Pelican Bay State Prison. Opened in 1989, this facility was built for one purpose: to hold California's most dangerous inmates, gang leaders, serial offenders, men too violent for regular prisons. Inside these prisons live many feared inmates. Some are gang leaders who still operate within the cell, while some are known for infamous murders mentioned in this video. These are the most feared inmates in America, and this is their final home. Hugo Pinell was born on March 10, 1945, in Nicaragua, and came to California at age 12. In 1964, at age 19, Pinell was charged with an offense involving a relationship he claimed was consensual. Despite an understanding he'd be eligible for parole in 6 months, he received 3 years to life. In 1970, while at Soledad Prison, Pinell was involved in an incident where a correctional officer was unalived. On August 21, 1971, Pinell was involved in one of the most notorious incidents in California prison history. At San Quentin State Prison, an escape attempt, led by Black Panther leader George Jackson, resulted in 6 deaths. Guards testified Jackson pulled a smuggled pistol and caused death to 2 officers. Correctional officers testified that Pinell used a razor blade weapon to slash their throats. 2 officers survived, 3 guards, 2 inmate trustees, and Jackson passed away. Jackson was shot running toward a prison wall. Pinell and 5 others became known as the San Quentin Six. Their trial lasted 16 months. On August 12, 1976, after 24 days of deliberation, Pinell was convicted of 2 counts of felony assault on a guard and given a 3rd life sentence. Because of repeated assaults on officers, Pinell was kept in solitary confinement for almost 45 years, more time in isolation than any other individual in the California state system. In 2014, California adopted new policies requiring active gang participation for segregated housing. Pinell was moved out of isolation at Pelican Bay and transferred to New Folsom. On August 12, 2015, just 2 weeks after being released into general population, Pinell was attacked in an exercise yard. 2 individuals stabbed the 71-year-old Pinell multiple times. He passed away at 1:22 p.m., sparking a riot involving approximately 70 inmates. The date was exactly 39 years after Pinell's conviction. Prosecutors later charged an Aryan Brotherhood leader with ordering Pinell's death. Pinell's daughter filed a wrongful death lawsuit claiming officials knew Pinell was a target and placed bets on his survival. Pinell spent 50 years behind bars, most in complete isolation, before being unalived in the same system that confined him. Cary Stayner was born on August 13, 1961, in Merced, California. On December 4, 1972, when Cary was 11, his 7-year-old brother Stephen was abducted by child molester Kenneth Parnell. Stephen was held captive for 7 years before escaping in 19. The trauma deeply affected the Stayner family. Cary felt neglected as his parents focused on searching for Stephen. Cary struggled with obsessive-compulsive disorder and trichotillomania from age 3, leading to bullying. After high school, Cary worked as a window installer and developed violent fantasies. In 1989, Stephen passed away in a motorcycle accident. In 1990, Cary's uncle was shot to passing away in his house where Cary was living. The offense was never solved, and Cary became a suspect. In 1997, Stayner was hired as a handyman at Cedar Lodge Motel in El Portal, California, outside Yosemite National Park. On February 15, 1999, Cary sent her 15-year-old daughter Julie. On March 18, 1999, hikers found the burned vehicle. Julie's body was found separately. The FBI initially focused on 2 half-brothers. On July 21, 1999, Stayner threatened 26-year-old naturalist Joy Armstrong with his gun and forced her into his vehicle. Armstrong threw herself out and tried to run, but Stayner caught and caused her death. Armstrong's remains were found the next day. FBI agents found Stayner at a nudist resort. During interrogation, Stayner confessed to all 4 deaths. He attempted to negotiate, requesting child pornography in exchange for his confession. Stayner was tried in federal court in November 2000 and sentenced to life for Armstrong's death. On August 27, 2002, he was convicted of 4 counts of first-degree offense and sentenced to death at San Quentin State Prison. California's last execution was in 2006, and in 2019, a moratorium was placed on capital punishment. Now 64, Stayner remains on death row, suspected in at least 4 other unsolved cases. Lloyd Avery II was born on June 21, 1969, in Los Angeles. He grew up in View Park, an affluent, mostly African-American neighborhood, and graduated from Beverly Hills High School, where he played baseball and water polo. His social connections introduced him to director John Singleton. In 1991, Singleton cast Avery in Boys in the Hood as a Bloods gang member who shoots high school football star Ricky Baker before being unalived in retaliation. Though Avery had fewer than 10 lines, his intensity made him stand out. After the film's success, Avery obtained an agent and appeared in Poetic Justice and Don't Be a Menace to South Central. Shortly after Boys Near the Hood, Avery moved into the Jungle, a Bloods-affiliated neighborhood. He had connections with the Black Peastone set and had jungles tattooed above his left eyebrow. The actor who played the Blood who shot Ricky had become the Blood who shot Ricky. Avery's behavior turned alarming. Since turning 30, he'd been fired from a film for breaking into a prison, nearly dismissed after threatening a director, and maced his roommate's mother, an MTV VJ downtown Julie Brown at a nightclub. On July 1999, Annette Lewis and Percy Branch were shot and caused death. Authorities charged Avery with double homicide. Branch told police Avery was not the shooter before he passed away. But Avery didn't fight for his freedom during trial, offering only a weak alibi. In December 2000, Avery was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree offense and sentenced to life. He was 31 years old. Avery arrived at Pelican Bay State Prison in March. Inside, he dedicated himself to Christianity, earning the nickname Baby Jesus. In August 2005, Avery got a new cellmate, Kevin Robbie, a Satanist serving life for harming his sisters and causing death of one. Avery saw Robbie as a spiritual project. On September 4, 2005, Robbie hit Avery over the head and strangled him during a satanic ceremony, laying him over a pentagram drawn in his own blood. Officers didn't discover Avery's body for approximately 38 hours. Lloyd Avery II was 36 years old. Robbie received another life sentence. Avery's family blamed prison management for placing 2 individuals with contrasting beliefs in the same cell. Joe Pegleg Morgan. Joseph Morgan was born on April 10, 1929 in San Pedro, California, to Croatian immigrants. His father anglicized the family name shortly after birth. Raised by his mother in Boyle Heights, a Hispanic neighborhood in East Los Angeles, young Morgan joined the Ford Maravilla street gang in the late 1930s. In 1946, at age 16, Morgan took his first life, beating a woman's husband to passing away with a tire iron. While awaiting trial, he escaped from Los Angeles County Jail by posing as his cellmate. Recaptured and convicted, he was sent to San Quentin State Prison at just 17, serving 9 years. Morgan paroled in 1955, but a year later robbed a West Covina bank with a machine gun. He was shot in the leg during the robbery, which caused him to lose his leg. Prison officials began referring to Morgan as Pegleg. In 1961, Morgan led 11 inmates in a jailbreak through a pipe shaft, using hacksaw blades hidden in his prosthetic leg. Morgan became well respected within the Mexican mafia and rose to become a high-ranking member, despite being the first non-Hispanic member. His connections with suppliers in Mexico helped establish LA-EMEA's narcotics distribution throughout California. He persuaded the Aryan Brotherhood to forge an alliance with LA-EMEA against their mutual rival, the Black Guerrilla family. Morgan's intellect set him apart. He read extensively on Mexican history, culture, and military strategy, spoke Spanish fluently and Nahuatl. By the mid to late 1970s, Morgan was one of the highest-ranking Mexican mafia members in Southern California, with influence extending across most of the U.S. and into Mexico. In 1978, Morgan was sentenced to life in prison. Morgan refused to meet with director Edward James Olmos and filed a $500,000 lawsuit. At least 2 individuals were allegedly unalived because of Mexican mafia displeasure with the script. On October 27, 1993, Morgan was diagnosed with inoperable liver cancer at California State Prison Corcoran. He passed away on November 9, 1993, before his wife's compassionate release request could be processed. Morgan was 64 years old and had spent most of 4 decades behind bars. Despite his Croatian heritage, Morgan left an indelible mark on California's prison system and street gang culture. Arturo Castellanos, known as Tablas, was born around 1951 and became one of the most powerful figures in the Mexican mafia and undisputed leader of Florencia 13, one of the largest street gangs in Southern California. In 1979, at age 28, Castellanos was convicted of causing death and sentenced to life. From 1990 onward, Te was housed in the security housing unit at Pelican Bay State Prison, spending decades in solitary confinement. Even from complete isolation, Castellanos controlled Florencia 13's operations across Los Angeles using coded letters, hand signals during visits, and smuggled cell phones. In 2004, law enforcement seized a document from Castellanos' cell showing his control over Florencia 13. The rules outlined how each clique should elect leaders, settle disputes, organize drug sales and prostitution, authorize assaults and deaths, and punish informants. According to prosecutors, Castellanos' grip on Florencia 13 led to racially motivated attacks. In 2007, authorities accused the gang of attacking rival black gangs to drive them from the Florence-Firestone area. Evidence at a 2008 racketeering trial showed Castellanos ordered attacks on the East Coast Crips through letters from prison. In 2013, Castellanos became a central figure in California prison hunger strikes. As one of 4 representatives selected by Pelican Bay prisoners to negotiate with officials, Castellanos helped organize protests involving over 30,000 inmates statewide, leading to significant changes in California's use of solitary confinement. Federal prosecutors charged Castellanos with using Florencia 13 to make money through drug dealing, gun running, gambling, extortion, and fraud. State corrections officials alleged Castellanos received payments directly into his inmate trust account. In 2015, prompted by the hunger strikes, California transferred prisoners out of the Pelican Bay SHU. After decades in isolation, Castellanos had direct contact with others for the first time in years. In 2023, Castellanos became terminally ill and was one of only 8 inmates granted compassionate release that year. He passed away shortly after, having shaped generations of gang members both on the streets and in prison yards throughout California. Todd Ashker was born around 1952 and entered the correctional facility system as a young man. In 1990, Ashker was convicted of second-degree offense for causing death of another inmate in what he described as a pre-arranged fight, receiving a life sentence. What validated as a member of the Aryan Brotherhood, an affiliation he denied for decades. On May 2, 1990, Ashker was transferred to the Security Housing Unit at Pelican Bay State Prison. Staff told him he would remain there until he paroled, passed away, or debriefed, providing information about gang members which could result in being unalived. Ashker remained in the SHU for 23 years. In the SHU, individuals are locked in cells for at least 22 hours daily, denied telephone calls, contact visits, programming, adequate food, and often medical care. In 2004, when Ashker requested program opportunities, Pelican Bay's response was, "Denied. You are considered a terrorist, and until you agree to fully assist the authorities with bringing down the gangs, you will remain in SHU with no program opportunities." In 2009, Ashker and his cellmate Danny Troxell filed a handwritten complaint challenging their prolonged solitary confinement as violating the 8th and 14th Amendments. In 2011, Ashker helped organize the first hunger strike. Over 6,600 incarcerated people in 13 facilities participated. They organized across racial lines, showing isolation wasn't necessary to prevent gang violence. When promised reforms weren't kept, Ashker helped organize a second strike in 2013. Over 30,000 inmates participated statewide, leading to public hearings on maximum security prison conditions. In 2012, Ashker's complaint became a federal class action lawsuit. On September 1, 2015, the case was settled, dramatically reducing California's solitary confinement population, prohibiting placement based solely on gang affiliation, capping Pelican Bay time to 5 years, and providing safer housing alternatives. Over 1,500 individuals were released from SHUs. In 2017, authorities placed Ashker back in administrative segregation. In 2022, a federal judge ruled that California Department of Corrections officials had retaliated against Ashker for his lawsuit role. Now in his 70s, Ashker remains incarcerated, with parole denied until 2026. Cody John Scott was born in November 1963 in Los Angeles. His family moved to West 69th Street in a rough neighborhood on the west side of South Central Los Angeles in 1972. With his mother working multiple jobs and neglect from his stepfather, Cody began hanging out on the streets. He befriended neighbor Stanley Tookie Williams, the leader of the West Side Crips and co-founder of the Crips. On June 15, 1975, the day of his 6th grade graduation, 11-year-old Cody was jumped into the 8-tray gangster Crips. That same night, armed with a sawed-off shotgun and instructed not to return unless he used all 8 rounds, Cody shot several Brims members. 2 years later, at age 13, Cody earned his street name Monster after beating a robbery target for 20 minutes, causing injuries so severe the person was left in a coma. For the next 16 years, Monster Cody became one of the most formidable Crip combat soldiers in Los Angeles. In the early 1980s, Scott was convicted of assault and sentenced to 7 years. During imprisonment, he discovered black nationalist ideology, converted to Islam, and adopted the name Saynika Shakur. He became an adherent of the New African Independence Movement. In 1988, Scott was paroled. In January 1991, he was arrested for assault and grand theft auto after beating an informant and stealing his van. While in solitary confinement, Scott wrote his autobiography. In 1993, Monster: The Autobiography of an LA Gang Member was published, becoming a bestseller with more than 300,000 copies in print and translations in 10 languages. The book provided a shockingly intimate picture of gang life. In the early 1990s, Scott met rapper Tupac Shakur. In 1996, as Scott was on the run for a parole violation, he met Tupac on the set of a music video, the last time before Tupac passed away. Scott was captured and sent to Pelican Bay State Prison for 5 years, most in solitary. In May 2008, Scott pleaded no contest to carjacking and robbery charges and was sentenced to 6 years. He published his fiction debut Thug in 2008 and Stand Up Struggle Forward in 2013. On June 6, 2021, Sonika Shakur was found deceased, at age 57, in a tent in Oceanside, California. He reportedly passed away from a stroke, leaving behind a complicated legacy, a child gang member responsible for taking lives, but also an introspective writer who gave the world its first glimpse into the mind of a traumatized inner-city youth. Barry Byron Mills was born on July 7, 1948, in Windsor, California, a small grape-growing town near Santa Rosa in Sonoma County. As an antsy 19-year-old with felonious ambitions, Mills headed south for Ventura. As he stepped off a Greyhound bus, he was arrested on charges of stealing a car from his hometown country club. He was remanded to the Sonoma County Honor Farm but escaped after a few months. In 1967, at age 19, Mills was first incarcerated, spending a year in county lockup. In 1969, Mills was convicted of armed robbery and entered the California state prison system. He would never see freedom again. At San Quentin State Prison, Mills became involved with the Aryan Brotherhood, a white supremacist prison gang that had originated at the prison in 1964. The gang initially formed as a defensive organization during prison racial violence, but by the 1970s had evolved into a violent criminal enterprise focused on controlling drug traffic, extortion, and contract killings. Mills was heavily muscled with a thick mustache and dark sunglasses. His eye had been injured in a knife fight with Mexican prisoners at San Quentin, giving him a sinister appearance. He became known as the Baron. In 1980, Mills became part of a three-member federal commission that consolidated power within the Aryan Brotherhood. The gang developed a hierarchical structure modeled after the Italian mafia. Mills, along with Tyler Bingham and others, transformed a 50 to 60-member state prison gang into more than 20,000 members throughout various state and federal prisons. According to the FBI, the gang makes up an extremely low percentage of the prison population, but is responsible for a disproportionately large number of prison murders. Mills expanded the Aryan Brotherhood's operations into narcotics dealing, racketeering, extortion, and murder for hire. The gang established channels to direct criminal activities not just inside prisons but on the streets. In 1996, Mills proposed that the Aryan Brotherhood absorb another prison gang known as the Dirty White Boys. By the 1990s, the gang had shifted focus from killing for strictly racial reasons to organized crime. Mills was sent to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, known as ADX Florence or Supermax, the nation's most secure federal prison. Despite being locked in solitary confinement 23 hours a day, Mills continued directing gang activities. Using couriers, he distributed orders from coast to coast. Mills had allegedly ordered dozens of bloody attacks while in custody in maximum security cell blocks. His defense attorney tried to humanize him at trial, pointing out that Mills enjoyed embroidering and crocheting. In taped phone conversations with friends, Mills discussed ordinary topics like getting older, stiff joints, sports, family issues, and finances. But prosecutors painted a different picture. They argued Mills believed he had the sovereign right to dispense life and death. On July 8, 2018, one day after his 70th birthday, Barry Byron Mills was found dead in his single-person cell at ADX Florence. Fremont County Coroner Randy Keller said the death did not appear suspicious. All signs indicated natural causes, though an autopsy was ordered. Mills had spent nearly 50 years behind bars, serving 4 consecutive life sentences. He died as he lived, confined but feared. The Baron had spent most of his life directing one of the most violent prison gangs in American history, transforming himself from a teenage car thief into a charismatic national crime boss. Tyler Davis Bingham was born around 1947. Little is publicly known about his early life or family background. What is known is that he entered the California prison system and became a petty criminal who would rise to become one of the most feared leaders of the Aryan Brotherhood. Bingham earned the nickname the Hulk, likely due to his imposing physical presence and reputation for violence. Despite his role in a white supremacist organization, Bingham has partial Jewish background and even sports a Star of David tattoo, an unusual detail for a leader of a neo-Nazi prison gang. Bingham joined the Aryan Brotherhood during its expansion phase in the 1970s. Through the 1980s, the gang had an informal structure. Members elected a 3-person council with limited oversight meant to act more as coordinators than leaders. Barry Mills, Edgar Hivell, and Tommy Silverstein were on the initial council, with Bingham joining later. Over the years, the council took on a more authoritative role. In 1980, as the Aryan Brotherhood consolidated its power structure, Bingham and Mills were allegedly selected to oversee the gang's actions as high commissioners in the federal prison system. The two men made all major decisions involving the federal prison branch of the Brotherhood. Their goal was to control, dominate, and influence the prison system so members could have an easy time while incarcerated, which really meant establishing a criminal empire behind bars. Bingham and Mills worked together to expand the Aryan Brotherhood's operations in federal and state prisons. They moved the group into narcotics dealing, racketeering, extortion, prostitution, and sanctioned murders. The gang took on organized crime-level power inside much of the United States prison system. By the 1990s, they had accumulated greater power and influence than the American mafia within the federal prison system. Bingham and Mills worked together to expand the Aryan Brotherhood's operations in federal and state prisons. They moved the group into narcotics dealing, racketeering, extortion, prostitution, and sanctioned murders. The gang took on organized crime-level power inside much of the United States prison system. By the 1990s, they had accumulated greater power and influence than the American mafia within the federal prison system. In 1997, Bingham and Mills allegedly ordered a race war against the D.C. Blacks, a rival prison gang at the federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. At the time, Bingham was housed in solitary confinement at the ADX Florence Supermax prison in Colorado. The idea behind placing gang leaders in solitary was that they would be less likely to communicate with others, causing a hitch in their operations. But Bingham and his gang figured out ways to remain in communication. Federal prosecutors sought the death penalty for Bingham and Mills. During the death penalty phase, prosecutors presented a shopping list of evils perpetrated by the pair to show they had left a legacy of violence and murder behind bars. The men had entered the California prison system as boys and graduated to ruling the nation's most ruthless prison gang as a vast criminal conspiracy. But the jury deadlocked on whether to impose death sentences. Bingham was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was sent back to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado. At ADX Florence, Bingham is housed in solitary confinement 23 hours a day with no possibility of parole. The sentences for all 4 gang members were imposed in 2007. Now in his late 70s, Tyler Davis Bingham remains incarcerated at ADX Florence Supermax. His co-commissioner Barry Mills died in the same prison in July 2018 at age 70. While the Aryan Brotherhood gang is still active in and outside of the prison system, the level of Bingham's current involvement in their operations remains unknown. Prison reports confirm Bingham is still alive and serving his sentence. From a petty criminal to the co-leader of one of the most violent and organized prison gangs in American history, Bingham's story is one of how power can be wielded even from the most restrictive confinement. Despite being locked in a concrete cell for decades, the Hulk remains a testament to the Aryan Brotherhood's reach, a reach that prosecutors spent years trying to dismantle, but one that continues to exist behind bars and on the streets. Hugo Pinell was born on March 10, 1945, in Nicaragua, and came to California at age 12. In 1964, at age 19, Pinell was charged with an offense involving a relationship he claimed was consensual. Despite an understanding he'd be eligible for parole in 6 months, he received 3 years to life. In 1970, while at Soledad Prison, Pinell was involved in an incident where a correctional officer was unalived. On August 21, 1971, Pinell was involved in one of the most notorious incidents in California prison history. At San Quentin State Prison, an escape attempt, led by Black Panther leader George Jackson, resulted in 6 deaths. Guards testified Jackson pulled a smuggled pistol and caused death to 2 officers. Correctional officers testified that Pinell used a razor blade weapon to slash their throats. 2 officers survived, 3 guards, 2 inmate trustees, and Jackson passed away. Jackson was shot running toward a prison wall. Pinell and 5 others became known as the San Quentin Six. Their trial lasted 16 months. On August 12, 1976, after 24 days of deliberation, Pinell was convicted of 2 counts of felony assault on a guard and given a 3rd life sentence. Because of repeated assaults on officers, Pinell was kept in solitary confinement for almost 45 years, more time in isolation than any other individual in the California state system. In 2014, California adopted new policies requiring active gang participation for segregated housing. Pinell was moved out of isolation at Pelican Bay and transferred to New Folsom. On August 12, 2015, just 2 weeks after being released into general population, Pinell was attacked in an exercise yard. 2 individuals stabbed the 71-year-old Pinell multiple times. He passed away at 1:22 p.m., sparking a riot involving approximately 70 inmates. The date was exactly 39 years after Pinell's conviction. Prosecutors later charged an Aryan Brotherhood leader with ordering Pinell's death. Pinell's daughter filed a wrongful death lawsuit claiming officials knew Pinell was a target and placed bets on his survival. Pinell spent 50 years behind bars, most in complete isolation, before being unalived in the same system that confined him.